Let me ask you something before we even get started. If you were going to invent a story meant to convince the ancient world that a man had risen from the dead, who would you choose as your key witness? A Roman official? A respected rabbi? One of the 12? Someone with credibility? With social standing? With a name people already trusted? You probably wouldn't choose a woman. Not in first century Judea. Not in a culture where a woman's testimony wasn't even admissible in court. And you definitely wouldn't choose a woman who, by her own story, had once been possessed by 7 demons. And yet, that's exactly who the Gospels place at the center of the resurrection morning. That's not a small detail. That's actually a massive one. And it's one of the reasons I think Mary Magdalene's story deserves a much more honest look than what most of us grew up hearing. Because the version most people carry around in their heads, the fallen woman, the repentant sinner, the one weeping at Jesus' feet with an alabaster jar, that version has been repeated so many times, across so many centuries, that it started to feel like scripture. But when you actually sit down with the Gospels and read what they say, just what they say, nothing added, you get a very different picture. A more complicated one, and honestly, a more powerful one. So let's go back to the text. Let's look at what we actually know. And I'll be upfront when something is tradition versus what's written. The first thing the Gospel of Luke tells you about Mary Magdalene, the very first thing, is that Jesus had cast 7 demons out of her. That's it. That's her introduction. Luke 8:2. No backstory, no explanation of what those demons looked like or how long she'd been suffering. Just that she was bound and then she wasn't. Now, a lot of people hear 7 demons and immediately go to dark places. They imagine something dramatic, something cinematic, and maybe it was, but the number 7 in Jewish thought often signals completeness, totality. So what Luke might be telling us isn't just that she had some demons. He's telling us she was completely in bondage. Whatever held her, it held all of her. Her mind, her will, her sense of self, all of it under something she could not break free from on her own. And then Jesus set her free. I think we rush past that too quickly, because that moment, whatever it looked like, was the hinge point of her entire life. Everything she does after that, every sacrifice, every risk, every act of loyalty, it all flows from that one encounter. She didn't follow Jesus because she was a good person who made good choices. She followed him because he walked into her darkness and pulled her out of it. That's a different kind of devotion. That's not admiration from a distance. That's the loyalty of someone who knows exactly what they were before and exactly who gave them a way out. And honestly, that's a more compelling reason to follow someone than almost anything else I can think of. Now here's the part that surprises most people. After her healing, Mary Magdalene doesn't just quietly go home and live a peaceful life. She joins the traveling ministry. She's on the road with Jesus and the 12. And Luke 8:3 tells us something remarkable. She, along with other women, was actually providing for the ministry out of her own resources. Think about what that means practically. Jesus and 12 disciples traveling from town to town. That costs money. Food, lodging, the logistics of a movement. And Mary Magdalene was one of the people making that possible. She wasn't a passive bystander. She was a financial supporter, a witness, a disciple in the truest sense of the word. And that's not a small role. That's a foundational one. But following Jesus wasn't comfortable. It wasn't safe. In first century Judea, publicly associating with a teacher who was increasingly drawing the suspicion of religious authorities, that came with real social cost, real risk. People talked. People judged. And for a woman who already had a complicated past, that scrutiny was probably sharper than most. there would have been whispers. There would have been people who looked at her and saw only what she used to be, not what she had become. That kind of thing wears on a person. It tests you. It makes you question whether the cost is worth it. She stayed anyway, and then we get to the cross. This is where I think Mary Magdalene's character becomes undeniable. Because when Jesus was arrested, most of the disciples scattered. Peter denied him 3 times. The 12, the men who had walked with him for years, who had heard every sermon, witnessed every miracle, shared every meal, were largely absent from Golgotha. Mary Magdalene was there. Mark 15:40 names her. John 19:25 names her. She stood near the cross while the man who had freed her was being executed in the most brutal, public, humiliating way the Roman Empire had designed. She didn't run, she didn't hide. She stayed in the most dangerous, most heartbreaking place she could have been. And she stayed because she loved him. I don't think we fully appreciate how much courage that took. This wasn't a quiet, private grief. This was a public execution. Roman soldiers were present. The crowd was hostile. Being seen there, being associated with a condemned man, carried its own risk. And she stood there anyway. Not because she had a plan, not because she knew how the story ended, but because she couldn't bring herself to leave. And then, she watched where they buried him. Mark 15:47 tells us she saw where the tomb was. That detail matters more than it might seem. She wasn't confused later. She wasn't going to the wrong tomb on Sunday morning. She knew exactly where he was laid, because she had stayed long enough to see it. She paid attention even in grief. She kept her eyes open even when everything in her probably wanted to look away. And then comes Sunday. John 20 tells us Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early. While it was still dark, that phrase is worth sitting with. While it was still dark, she didn't wait for daylight. She didn't wait for certainty. She came in the dark, with grief, with spices, with nowhere else she wanted to be. There's something almost unbearable about that image, a woman walking toward a sealed tomb before sunrise. Not because she expected anything, but because she simply had to be near him. She finds the stone rolled away. She runs to Peter and John. They come, they look, they leave. And then, this is the part that gets me every time. Mary stays. She's standing outside the tomb, weeping, and she looks in again. She sees 2 angels. They ask her why she's crying, and she says, "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." She turns around. There's a man standing there. She thinks he's the gardener. And she says,
"This is so human it almost hurts, sir. If you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him."
She's going to carry a body, alone. She doesn't know how. She doesn't care. She just wants to find him. And then he says her name. Mary. 1 word. And she knows. Now here's something that often gets misread. When Jesus says, "Do not cling to me," or in some translations, "Do not hold on to me," people sometimes hear rejection, like he's pushing her away. But that's not what's happening. What he's doing is redirecting her. He's saying, "The way you knew me before, that's changing. What comes next is bigger than what you can hold on to right now. Go. Tell them." And she does. She goes to the disciples and says,
"I have seen the Lord. He is risen as he said."
That exact sentence is the first proclamation of the resurrection ever spoken by a human voice. Not Peter, not John, Mary Magdalene. The early church father Hippolytus of Rome called her the apostle to the apostles. And honestly, that title is just accurate. She was sent. She carried the message. She announced Easter. So why did so many people get her story wrong for so long? Part of it traces back to a homily. preached by Pope Gregory I in 591 AD, where he merged Mary Magdalene with the unnamed sinful woman in Luke 7 and with Mary of Bethany. It was a theologically tidy move, a story of sin, repentance, and redemption, pastorally compelling. But historically, it wasn't supported by the text. The Eastern Church never accepted that conflation. They always honored her as the myrrh-bearer, equal to the apostles. And in 1969, the Roman Catholic Church formally separated her feast day from those other figures. In 2016, Pope Francis elevated her feast to the same liturgical rank as the apostles themselves. So, the Church corrected it. That matters. But the cultural image, the fallen woman, the sinner, that one has been harder to shake. It got into paintings, into literature, into the way people casually reference her name. And for centuries, that image overshadowed the actual biblical record of who she was. And here's where I want to land, because I think this is the part that actually matters most. We resemble Mary Magdalene more than we'd like to admit. Not because we've all been possessed by demons, though some of us know what it's like to be driven by something we couldn't control. Not because we've all stood at a cross, though some of us have sat in rooms where everything we believed felt like it was dying. We resemble her because most of us have a before. A version of ourselves we're not proud of, a chapter we'd rather skip over, and the quiet fear, the one we don't always say out loud, is that God sees that chapter first, that it defines us, that it disqualifies us from being used for anything meaningful. Mary Magdalene's story says something different. It says that the person Jesus chose to announce the most important event in human history was someone with a complicated past, a public story, and a grief so heavy she was looking for a dead body in the dark. It says that grace doesn't wait for you to have it together. It says that showing up, even in the dark, even weeping, even not fully understanding what's happening, is enough. It says that your before is not your disqualification. It might actually be the very thing that makes your witness credible, because she knew what it was like to be completely lost. And she knew what it was like to be completely found. And when she said, "I have seen the Lord," people who knew her story understood exactly what that meant. She came while it was still dark, and the light found her anyway. That's not a small thing. That's the whole gospel, really, compressed into one woman's story, one garden, one name spoken out loud. If you've ever felt like your past makes you less qualified for God's purposes, Mary Magdalene is your answer, not because she was perfect, but because she wasn't. And he chose her anyway. He said her name. He sent her first. And if he did that for her, then maybe, just maybe, he's not done with you either.